Yogi Brian. It's called @RealYogiBrian. And he started a blog years ago making fun of...
No, this is great. Please keep going.
Oh, he started a blog basically making fun of yoga. That was his whole thing, he was making fun of how yoga had become this mainstream Western, athletic wear kind of brand rather than a spiritual practice. But the more he would go and make fun, he started to gain benefits from doing yoga. So he was like, all right. So that's legit. Okay, fine. So then he decided to go to meditation and make fun of meditation. Fast forward, he now is like a yoga teacher, a meditation guru, but it's non-traditional. So that can't be recorded, but it's very funny. But if you get a chance, go on to Spotify. You have to do.
Can't be recorded. That was the whole. That was gonna be the whole lead into the podcast.
Well, we could tell you what it says, but you couldn't. You can just substitute a word.
All right.
Okay,
hold on. She'll substitute.
No, I'll substitute a word. So, imagine a force field of zero giving
fudgesicles. Yeah.
Yes. Imagine a force field of zero fudgesicles surrounding and protecting you.
That's how I feel with you two.
Yeah. It's releasing the fudgesicles is what his kind of whole thing is.
I'm just surrounded by fudgesicles every time we start this podcast. It is the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's University Health Network with the listen, I have to say, ladies, you both would be great for radio because typically we've been trying to start recording this episode for a good, I'd say about 10 minutes. We've talked about Taylor Swift. We've talked about John Mayer. We've touched on a lot of different topics, but we still haven't even started the actual show. You guys would be great in radio because that's how it goes all the time. You have one topic in mind, and the next thing you know, you're talking about Taylor Swift and John Mayer.
Yeah, we're really good at just going off topic and staying there for a while.
Uh-huh. I have so many things I want to talk about.
Me too.
I guess my job's to reel it all back in. So
it is.
It is Jody, McCloud, Missmer, and Amie, Alanson, Dundon. It's brought to you by St. Luke's University Health Network. As always, ladies, welcome. I'm in my Christmas gear. Come on, where are we at on this one?
I'm in my Christmas sweater.
That is a good Christmas sweater, yeah.
Well, it's better than what I've worn other years.
True. We didn't get the memo.
Did you see that?
I have two questions. One, it was to elaborate Jody, and two, it was Amie just being like, "Yeah, true. I've seen some of those other
true."
Which leads us into our conversation about workplace mental health.
Yes.
So, ladies, I can't imagine two better people to talk to about this in a world where I feel like, especially ever since the pandemic hit, where the balance of work-life balance has become such an important thing. Trying to find time away from work, but still being immersed in what you're doing, caring about your career. I'm sure that a lot of those things are going through a lot of people's minds as we're kind of going through life here as adults, which is not how I feel like we've been for the last 10 minutes. But as we're going through life as adults, can we just talk, just a general conversation to start about what workplace mental health is? Amie, I'll go ahead and start with you. Workplace mental health, what is that kind of defined as?
So I think we need to talk about workplace mental health and out of work mental health to define either one of them. And this is why, I think that we need a healthy ratio of work time to lifetime. And that's how you get healthy in either place. What's your ratio of time at work, time spent at work, time doing work, time thinking about work, time recovering from work? And then what's your ratio of life outside of work, right? So in my experience, workplace balance, or workplace mental health is really about, do I have a ratio that keeps me healthy? And one of the things that I think we're not very good at is, people are like, oh yeah, I work 9 to 5. I have good work-life balance, but do you? Do you shut down at 5? Do you answer texts, emails, phone calls after 5? Do you set your end-of-day memo very clearly so colleagues or people that work for you know that you're kind of on your life time and not your work time? What's your ratio? Are you thinking, did you leave work, but you're thinking about it for the rest of the night?
You added extra things too. I just want to, which I thought was interesting, because as I was researching different elements of how to create balance, you mentioned going to work, working, thinking about work, shutting down from work, which I think is important. And because it's not just the 9 to 5,
Right.
to your point.
Right.
And I never really thought about that until I started to look through different articles on creating balance. And they were talking about, pre-work, actual work, ending the day from work, and releasing from work. A couple of different areas I saw, and I'll have one woman I listened to, and you'd be happy, she's from Philadelphia and she's a Philly fan.
Excellent.
Yep. I know. Tori DeSimone is her name. I'd never heard of her, but she kept using the word releasing from work. And I thought that was such a interesting term. But it's funny now, you, the experienced one, saying there is that capacity in that walkthrough of, it's not just 9 to 5. It's everything leading up to that and then shutting down and releasing.
Yeah.
So I think that's where maybe the conversation can kind of start for us, because first of all, we have accessibility to ourselves that we never had 20, 30 years ago. Your email's on your phone. You get a notification when that email goes off. Now, you can control those things, but what kind of are your expectations in your workplace? Are you supposed to always kind of be on, even when you're off? So can we just kind of go into that a bit, because I think that is such my wife and I say to each other all the time, put your phone down, because we know exactly what we're doing. We're whether I'm looking for stories, she's doing her thing. We're always kind of finding moments where it's like, stop, and just kind of concentrate on what's going on at the moment. So how do we turn it off? What directions do we take to try to do that? Jody, I'll go ahead and start with you. When we talk about turning it off, where do we go with that?
Yeah, I think organizationally you need to understand where the expectations are. And I will start with myself as a boss and say that I do not do the best job in setting boundaries for myself, and therefore I acknowledge that there are times that I impact the ability for my team to also have balance. And I try to limit my interactions after hours as a boss for things that are critical. I think your role often defines the expectation as well, right? There are some people who I never have to, nor would I, as an organizational leader, reach out to. I wouldn't do that. But there's this thing called exempt status for work, where you're really always available in a means of the work that we do. But I believe that you have to organizationally have a conversation to know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And that's up to you, right? That's up to me as an employee, but it's also up to me as a boss to respect that. So full disclosure, this woman sitting next to me gets phone calls or texts from me, not often, but typically it's of urgent or emergent matter.
Yeah.
But I know that that's where she is as an employee. But it's also who she is as a human being. So I would say organizationally, you need to have and understand your standard. You also need to have and understand the role of the individual who's in that position. And then you really need to have a conversation with your leader to have an understanding of what their expectations are, and then set some boundaries. And that's okay. I mean, I've had individuals come to me and say, hey, look, I need to be done at 5:15 today. Meanwhile, they started at 8. I need to be done at 5:15 today because I have soccer practice and I'm taking my daughter to dance, and I'm doing all this. And so she's setting boundaries, and I've noticed that she's continued to set those boundaries by not replying to me if I'm sending something, which is okay because she shouldn't have to.
Right.
So I think it's an organizational piece. I really do. And there's
So,
personal responsibility as well.
You're 100% right. And I also do think that the line of work that you're in plays a role, right?
Yeah.
So in healthcare.
Yeah, we're in a 24/7 human operation.
Right.
Yeah.
That's part of it. But I think that there's definitely tips and stuff that, and I want to talk about those because what happens is if you don't set those boundaries, like you were just talking about, that's where we start to see anxiety, depression, the big new catchphrase, imposter syndrome, right? We start to see things like that creep into our thoughts and kind of spiral us downward. And then, we're playing catch up and we're working later. So we can really get sticky if we don't really try to stick to some sort of good, healthy balance. And I think this whole work from home thing that has started since COVID, yes, it existed before COVID, but that has really kind of become a lot of people's life since COVID, is making things a little bit more difficult for a lot of people. We thought it was going to make life easier for them. But even in the world of healthcare now, if you're not a provider rounding on patients, a lot of the time you have the opportunity now to do work from home, where you never did before. So it's, for some people, it's learning how to do the same job in a much different environment. And it's not necessarily great for our mental health, right? So it's figuring out how to have regular work-life balance when you work in the office. And then it's, how do I do this when I work from home, where now I've got distractions of washing machines and, food to get cooked.
Comfy couches.
And all this has to get made. Well, if I'm home and I have a 5-minute break between meetings, I really should, scrub the tub out because the kids made a mess in it last night, with crayons and stuff. So whatever. So it's really two different worlds of how do I have balance at work? How do I keep boundaries at work? And how do I do that from home? And then as leaders, how do we help people maintain those balances? And I think you're spot on. As your one up has to set that example for you, in terms of what do we allow and what do we model.
I think, when we talked about having this episode, there were parts that we just felt like, gosh, we could go in so many different directions as we always do. And the whole objective is to start having that conversation. But it is your role. It is who you work for. It is what you have set as an expectation for yourself. And the work from home element, what I found was when I was reading through ways to create balance, really the things that we should be doing to create balance at home, work from home, are the same things we should be doing if we're walking into an office. And I thought, but this is the first time we're talking about it, right? We're like, oh, it's okay. You go into the office and you shut down, you go home. But that's not true. You have to release the day. You have to start it and release it. And it starts with having a routine, setting structure, and having boundaries. And as I was researching, so many of our conversations, Crockett, have been around setting boundaries, having nothing to do with work. But a lot of the things that I was reading apply to many different aspects of your life. But when you're creating balance between work and home, you have to set a boundary and you have to have structure. If you have trouble with boundaries, because that's a tough word for people, then I would just say you need to have a structure for the day. A wake-up time, a sleep time, an eating time, a workout time.
It's the way that we try to raise our children, right? We give them
I hope so.
Routine. We give them we need the same thing. And just to go into a little bit of depth, I think, around routine and structure, if you're working from home say you used to go in to the office every day. What are you doing with that commute time? Mm-hmm. So is your commute time now, I roll out of bed, literally roll to my desk and I start? Or do I have a morning coffee ritual routine? Do I have a 15-minute yoga routine? Do I listen to a podcast that I would have listened to on my drive in? Do I take that time to clear my head and listen to Jody and Amie?
And why wouldn't you listen to Jody and Amie and Crockett?
I was just going to suggest a podcast that you could listen to in that morning.
Yeah, take a shower.
Right.
Take a shower, get dressed.
Make your bed.
Oh, well, that's a whole nother podcast.
If you're working from home, you don't want to have the invite to crawl back into bed. And never, ever, ever work from bed. Bed should be a sleep place, not a workplace.
I better write that down. Oh. Never, ever,
ever. Working from bed it's bad for sleep. And it's also you're really, really, really
how many evers was that? Like never, ever
20.
Well, I think it goes back to Taylor Swift. So never, ever, ever
there you go.
Work in bed. So
to work in bed.
Oh, maybe look at you changing lyrics.
Lots of lyric changes for
no.
Taylor.
Go Tay.
All right.
Throwing the hook out in the water and reeling in what I can here, ladies.
Right.
So
bed is sacred.
Oh.
No checking your emails.
Yeah, we're going to try that. I commit to trying that. Not checking emails from bed.
Okay.
I'll try. I did notice, though, here a couple interesting tips since we're on the morning section. A couple of places I saw that individuals were waking up and reading, not on a phone, but actually reading. Either there's a book or a chapter or an article. And I thought that was really interesting. And from bed, not from bed, whatever. And they used it as an opportunity to reset. And they said it might sound odd that you're resetting after you just spent hopefully 8 hours of resetting, but it does something to start your day in a calm state by reading and focusing, rather than highly not recommended beginning your day with social media, because you haven't even started your life. Was what one of the examples was. You haven't started your life, but now you're checking on everybody else's life and you haven't even started your life that day. So just an interesting tip. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that be neat? Like just put an article next to your bed and you wake up in the morning, instead of picking up your phone, you're picking up this article and you're starting to read it, even if you don't finish it. But I thought I'd never heard of anybody not reading emails when they wake up in the morning. It seemed very novel.
It is possible. And the other piece to that is for people that maybe aren't necessarily prolific readers. I would argue you could get the same effect by waking up and journaling.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Sure. Read an article or journal and kind of get your mind clear that way. Right. Yeah. But can we also talk about lunch? So here's my thing.
What's lunch?
What a Seinfeld-esque transition.
Right?
And what's the deal with lunch?
What's the deal with lunch? So are we supposed to be eating, like taking a lunch break at work or not, whether you're at work or at home? And here's why I asked this. And I've talked to lots of different people, and I've just by virtue of people I get to talk to and see and just life and what we see on social media, the expectation seems to be with virtual meetings, which lots of us have all day, every day. And before all this virtual stuff, we would actually physically get up and walk to a meeting and sit in a room together or drive to a meeting.
Car, yeah.
Now everything's back-to-back virtual. So literally there's very little time for breaks or food or any of that kind of take a deep breath and decompress. It's a 30-minute lunch is not a thing anymore for a lot of people.
I think, though, much like not picking my phone up in the morning and starting emails, much like that, we need to acknowledge that it is important and make it happen.
But that's a cultural thing, I think, depending where you work. Because there are people that work for firms and law firms and places there are a lot of people that don't, they're just back to back to back to back.
But I think that goes back to roles, right? I think you also can choose. And we saw this. We're seeing this now with the Great Resignation and all those things. we saw people prioritize things differently. There's a reason why some people left the workforce. There's a reason why some people chose different career paths. Some individuals, we talk about the pandemic in a very negative way, but I think for a lot of people, they took a step back and reevaluated, and some of them made the move. Mm-hmm. Some of them said, oh, wait a second, I haven't been working and I've been living on a single income for the last 2 years, and by golly, we made it work. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to go back to the grind, right? I'm sure nobody said by golly, but
I've got to make sure that's allowed to be said in a podcast. I've got to
check that. Check that.
Check.
But I do think that there was a reimagining for individuals. And I think that I'm okay with working through my lunch because that's who I am and I do that. Right.
Well, so am I.
Yeah.
And I'm not, but for a lot of people, it's been a big shift.
No. I'm not saying, I'm just saying, but I do think that it needs to be recognized and acknowledged. And then I think you need to decide whether or not maybe it's not a 12 o'clock thing. Maybe it's an 11:30 thing. Maybe it's a 10:30 thing. I can tell you that I bring my lunch sometimes, most of the time. And there are some times where my lunch is gone by 10:30. Look at Crockett trying not to laugh. But sometimes
because you went sometimes, most of the time. Yeah. What you're talking to a guy who's up so early that like by 9 a.m. when you're thinking about coffee, I'm like, spaghetti sounds good.
Right. But that's my point. It doesn't have to be, lunch doesn't have to be noon. Lunch could be 11, but I think it's the break. If I'm hearing you, Amie, it's almost that break. It's not necessarily the consumption of a sandwich.
Correct. Are we giving ourselves any downtime during a day?
So what's reasonable? Yeah. Well, let me ask this, not from a workplace perspective, but for a human perspective. What is ideal in terms of breaking, whether it's 10 minutes of breathing or 5 minutes of closing your eyes and leaning back?
See, and I think that's different for everybody.
Okay. But is it necessary for everybody?
Sure. It's kind of, the way I look at it is, do you leave your car engine running all day?
Why does she always does that?
Do you?
No.
Right. So if I have a really long drive and I'm driving for 8 hours, mm-hmm. Do I take a break? Whatever, Yeah. Do I need to
you have to stop and get gas.
Stop and get gas? Do I need to go get?
That's a great point.
Get my McDonald's or my Wednesdays.
Can we say that on here?
I don't know if I can say McDonald's. I just did.
Well, we're always looking for sponsorship. Shout out McDonald's.
But
I love
you
your
know
French
what I mean.
Fries. I'm just manifesting now. I'm manifesting.
Listen, we if we're on an 8 or 9 or 10 hour drive, as we work an 8 or 9 or a 10 hour workday, we take breaks to refuel our bodies, our cars. Maybe we don't want the engine to overheat. Mm-hmm. We give it 20 minutes. We're running our own engine all day long.
Do you know what? And it's interesting that you use that example because I know this, for those who are listening, you may think, yeah, of course, Jody, but I never really realized it. So I drove out to Pittsburgh and I drove a little bit faster than the speed limit and safely, of course. But I filled my gas tank when I left, and it's about 300 and some odd miles. And when I filled my gas tank said 422 miles to empty. I had to stop and get gas an hour from my destination, which meant I only got 200 and some miles out of that tank of gas that if I were running normally and taking breaks would have given me about 400 miles.
I've got to say, you slightly alluded to going above the speed limit. If you were at 420, so we'll talk about the next podcast is about math.
Our friends from the Allentown Police Department who are listening now are hearing that.
I wasn't in Allentown. Okay, let me back up. So a friend of mine was driving to Pittsburgh. Could we change it? It wasn't me. No,
and
but
you were in a DeLorean. You went back to
but
1955.
my
because you were
point
going so fast.
my point is still that I didn't realize that by going above by driving faster than I normally would, I did not realize that you burn through gas that fast.
Right, and that's wear and tear
And
on your car.
And then when you say your body,
Right.
it makes sense.
Yes.
But I, at my age of a certain number, didn't realize that was actually true. When my parents would say, "You're burning through gas," that's my dad's voice. "You're burning through gas." I never really understood it until I saw it.
Right. But so that's kind of the analogy I think about when we talk about just running all day on fumes,
Yeah.
and what that looks like. And in order to put some balance back into our worlds, I think you need to look at blocking time in your day, blocking time in your calendar, in your day, in a way that makes sense to you as an individual human being, and in a way that's not going to get you fired. So there's a whole lot of variables here.
I think I think you're going in a direction too where I think you need to understand organizationally what your expectations are and be able to set priorities, because there are things that, and maybe that's how you end a day and release the day, is that you finish the day by listing out the things that you hope to accomplish the following day in kind of a priority order, or you number them. And trust me, for those who are listening, this is not me. These are things I should be doing, that as I was researching thought, oh my gosh, what a great idea. I need to try these. I need to commit to these. Like, we need to, but I think the prioritization is key.
Well, I think the reason that we're having this whole conversation is that a lot of us feel like that you're kind of looking at your own perspective and you're thinking, oh, this is absolutely me. I am the person that's working too much, or I am the person that's doing too much. And that's why we're having this conversation, because it's probably like we need to slow down a little bit, take a deep breath. And to your point, depending on the job that you work, like part of the reason I wanted to start working in mornings when I got into radio was because I knew when my kids were old enough, I wanted to be the little league coach. I wanted to be the basketball coach. I wanted to do all those things that when they got home from school, I was going to probably miss them going into school. But when they got home, I was able to take over things from there, take care of dinner, do all those things. And those things are valuable to me. Now, the problem that I have personally is the notifications on my phone, because I will never leave a notification unturned. My co-host, Selena, in the morning just told me this morning, I think she has thousands of unread messages, which literally sends me like back into a wall. I can't even comprehend that. But my problem is where I'll get lost in things, and where the conversation happens with my wife all the time of get off your phone, take a break, is that there's no notification that I won't miss. We've got social media we've got to keep up with. We've got emails that we've got to keep up with. There's content that's constantly happening that we could be talking about on a show. And I feel like everybody's kind of got that balance that they've got to find in their own lives. And to your point, like I work in a much different environment than the two of you do.
Oh, yeah.
You work in a 24/7 kind of environment where even for myself, my funny thing is my biggest problem that I have with work is that when my work day's kind of done, it's about noon. Like I'm ready to be like, okay, I'm ready to go on with my day because I start so early. Well, there's a good chance that I'm waiting for an email from sales about something, or something comes up that doesn't happen until 3:00 in the afternoon. And I'm kind of like, well, this is my time now. But the understanding is, and I'm sure the biggest problem that a lot of people have is, if I'm not on right now, if I'm not a part of this email, if I'm not a part of this Zoom call or meeting or whatever it may be, that's a bad look on me. And what could happen to my job? Someone else could come in that's working harder, doing more. And I think that's the whole reason we're having this conversation. It's probably rooted somewhere in fear of not doing enough, trying to keep up with whatever that job is. Like I look around all the time and I'll see people in my industry post stuff on social media and they're doing different creative things. And I'm thinking, man, are we doing enough? Am I doing enough? And it's just so easy to get down that rabbit hole of, am I even good enough to do this? I have to do more. I have to hit the gas. I don't have time to stop for fuel. And I think that's the reason we're having this conversation, is because trying to figure out where that line is of I'm doing too much to, miss some things that I want to do. And I'm doing too much because I want to keep my job, because I'm in fear that somebody is going to be out there and try to take it.
So I want to say two things, because you said two things that made me really think. The first is, I think we all need to think about who we are without our job. Who are you without the job? Because you need to be that person whether you have the job or not. And in order to be that person, you have to have time when you're not your job. So I that's a critical and crucial point to say, if I don't have this job, who am I? You need to figure that out. And that takes time. I think the other thing that you said that is really, really poignant is that you made plans for the parent you wanted to be prior to having children. You made a choice in your work. I think everyone needs to understand that you can make that choice and make that change at any point in your career. Going back to what I said about the pandemic, I think that's what people did. They reprioritized, not everyone, but some of the people who made changes took a look at who they were without their job and said, I like this better, and made a change. So I think those two things you said is knowing who you are when you're not at work. You know, who are you? And then also, it's okay to change what you want and who you want to be in terms of your workplace based upon who you are outside of the workplace.
Yeah, and Crockett, if you love what you do and who you are, you know, at your place of work, then how do you just tweak it a little bit and maybe challenge yourself? Okay, instead of answering that 3:00 email, can I wait 30 minutes? Is it imperative that I answer this right now, or can I set a boundary and say I'm going to see what everybody else does in the next 30 minutes, and then I'll read all of that, and then I'm going to offer my expertise after that.
Yeah,
you know, that was something that I had to learn too. Was just because I get an email doesn't mean I have to be the first person to answer it in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, take a pause. It's amazing how people can figure something out that they included you in on an email.
Without you.
Yeah, and by the time you get back to it, they've already solved it.
And you know what? It's okay. You still have your job and you're still well respected. You know, so
I don't know about well respected, but the job is still there. That's for sure.
Yeah, Amie, come on. You can't go projecting that.
I guess not.
I'm the one wearing a Grinch sweatshirt right now. Amie, you kind of keep talking about these different tips when it comes to boundaries that we've kind of wanted to dive into a little bit. I want to make sure we get enough time to get to those because you've definitely mentioned those particular tips a couple of times. So if we're trying to find that, if we're trying to center ourselves as best as we can as employee, as adults, parents, students, whatever the case may be, whatever you're doing with your life, just some of those tips that maybe can kind of help us perhaps get off the gas and shift down to neutral a little bit to kind of settle things down a little bit.
Sure. Certainly we've talked about a bunch of them. But I think this is maybe downshifting one, but when you're applying to jobs, if you're somebody who's in the market right now of applying for a new job, ask important questions about downtime and about culture. And, you know, there's a lot of companies that are letting you work 100% remote, and it's becoming very common to give unlimited paid vacation. So when you're applying for that job, say, but does anybody take it? Does anybody take that vacation? Are you allowed to take vacation? Are you allowed to disconnect? Ask all the shiny things that are attracting you to this new job. Make sure you ask the hard questions to see if it's still shiny after you sign that contract. Right?
Sure.
Because, you know, used car salesmen can make a car look amazing. But if I didn't ask the right questions, you know, it's not going to be what I wanted.
Shout out to used car salesmen.
Right. Love them.
Shout out to Hoopties, getting them out on the road. What up?
What up? But so I say that, you know, ask the important questions. Unlimited paid vacation is a real thing now, but what does that really mean? You know, block time in your work calendar. Let your one-up know, as Jody was just talking about, that, you know, here's my boundary. So, you know, and if you can work remote, can you travel? Do you have to be sitting at home? Could you take a family vacation and have work time can you there are places you can go. I'm going to take a month and move to Florida and I'm going to work from the beach. Everybody has a different need. If that's a need that you have, explore it. If you have that option to work 100% remote and can maybe get a change of scenery, that may help too. Go be closer to family for the holidays. Go away for longer and just do a little work from wherever you're going.
I like that the perspective of your tips are focused on choosing.
Yeah.
Right. I think sometimes we can choose. I think we need to be fair that there are individuals out there who are working a very traditional environment. You know, I think about our CNAs. I think about our nurses. I think about our environmental services. I think about our truck drivers. I think about those who are maybe in sales and they're listening to this podcast right now and they're going, yeah, right, that's going to work. But I do think the tip of choosing out of the gate, knowing what you want to do, the blocking of the calendar or especially if you're in an environment where you're in a corporate environment where you can block your calendar. I think if you're in an environment where you're a CNA or a nurse, I think it's important to make sure that you take the allotted break times that you need.
Yeah.
You need to advocate for yourself when it is that time. Hey, I've been here since, 6, it's 12:15. I've been here with this patient. I need a break. And it's recognizing that. And I think for those who are listening, who are in positions of leadership, it's knowing that you need to be mindful of what your staff needs. Because let's talk about how much more productive someone is when they have those breaks. You just said it. You have to stop and get gas. So as leaders who are hearing this, making sure that you're giving your staff time to stop and get gas. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that I saw was, having a routine in the morning, making sure that you're waking up, you're reading, you're journaling, that you're taking a shower if you didn't take one the night before, you're having breakfast, you're commuting in whatever form that is if you're at home, and if you're working and headed into a place of work, making sure that your commute is valuable, that you're taking the time to commute and you're not already engaged in thinking about what you have to do. And then the releasing of the day is really making sure that you know what you've accomplished that day and you set maybe 1 or 2 things that you want to do tomorrow, but you have to let it go. But you do have to acknowledge what you did accomplish that day, even if it's one thing.
Well, and I was just going to say, make yourself a list of wins for the day. What were my wins today?
Yeah.
What was one win from today?
Yeah. I found Mr. Jones' sock that he'd been missing for 2 weeks. Like, it may seem little, but
it was down at the New Amsterdam. That's where.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
On that note,
I don't know how you come back from that. He just bought himself a great
guitar. I don't know if you knew that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't even know. I don't even. One of the songs that popped.
That's a win in my day.
That's your win.
No, you're right. You're right. Your win is that you were able to acknowledge Counting Crows.
Yes,
absolutely. That's okay. When you were talking about something being the problem, in my head, I just kept hearing, "It's me.
I'm the problem. It's me."
Yeah.
Yeah. Good Taylor Swift reference.
Another Taylor Swift reference.
Excellent.
If her future brother-in-law, Jason, ever wants to come on the podcast, he is welcome. Just throwing that out there.
I've done a show with Jason Kelsey before. I'll try to throw a reel out to him. So I'll see. If
we would love to have Jason Kelsey.
Probably doesn't remember me at all, but we did a show together.
You don't know that. You don't know.
I'm sure he does.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, what haven't we done today? Let's all check a win box for each other.
Check a win.
Check.
What's my win?
Well, I'll tell you what your win is right now. We have hit the quarter century mark with these podcasts. This is our 25th episode.
Oh,
so congratulations.
Yay.
Happy silver.
Congratulations.
That is a wonderful mark. 25 episodes. Not an easy thing to do in the podcast world because a lot of people do 2 or 3 and then they're like, where do we go from here?
That was kind of Kermit the Frogish. That was really nice.
I do an okay Kermit the Frog is really what it is.
My
son
love
asks me to do it all the time.
You're getting acknowledgement from the room, by the way.
There's some head nods going on.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you back there.
There's another win.
So that's another.
Yet another win.
Counting
Check.
crows and Kermit the Frog.
Check.
You have those on your bingo cards for the Just Start the
Check.
Conversation
Check.
podcast today.
Not on the work-life balance checklist.
Yeah,
no.
but
But we did
culture,
it.
We're all over the place.
Okay.
Yes.
Wait, I do have to mention this before. I know we're about to close, but Amie just flipped her paper over and has grids of pros and cons.
I do, but it's okay.
No, but I'm just saying some people are very visual. And when you flip that over, I'm a visual person. I would need a grid like that. So you're a list of pros, list of cons. I'm thinking a list of wins, a list of things I'm going to do tomorrow. So it was just, I don't know, just hit me.
Okay.
So I love it. Happy
I
I
20.
think we're going to need to come back to this work from home,
Yeah.
work in.
I do too.
in-house,
Yeah.
I do
Agreed.
too.
Conversation as well. So hold that thought. We'll save that for one of the next 25 episodes. What do you say?
Sounds
Sounds
good.
It is the Just Start the Conversation podcast. It's brought to you by St. Luke's University Health Network with Jody, McCloud, Missmer, and Amie, Alanson, Dundon. I'm Kevin Crockett. Ladies, happy holidays to you. Enjoy it. We'll talk in the new year. Celebrate good times. Come on. And that's the last pop culture reference. All done now.
All right,
That's it.
cool.
Take care.
Bye.
Have a great day and a happy new year to you. It is the Just Start the Conversation podcast.